March 2020. Many people still remember how quickly store shelves emptied. First rice and pasta disappeared, then sugar, then flour. And after that, something almost nobody expected vanished completely. Yeast. Those tiny packets that had always been available at the same price suddenly could not be found anywhere. People had flour. They had water. Many even had more free time than they had experienced in years. But they could not bake bread. Not because they lacked skill, because they had outsourced one living biological process to a supply chain that collapsed in just a few days. Meanwhile, households that kept a jar of active starter culture at home continued baking without interruption. They depended on no store, no truck delivery, no empty shelf. That difference mattered. It meant fresh bread every week instead of waiting for stores to restock. And this was not the first time fragile systems failed. It may not be the last. But independence is only part of the story. There is something even more important that most people do not realize. The bread many families grew up eating was often healthier than much of the bread sold today. The ingredients may look similar: flour, water, salt, yeast. But one critical thing changed: fermentation. For thousands of years, bread was made slowly using living cultures of wild yeast and beneficial bacteria. Then modern industry replaced that natural process with speed-focused production. Factories wanted faster rising dough, shorter schedules, and lower costs. Your digestion was never the priority. That is why learning to make a traditional starter is not just about emergency preparedness or nostalgia. It is about reclaiming a food process that once supported better nutrition, better digestion, and real self-reliance. And surprisingly, you can begin with something as simple as 1 potato and 3 days. Most people assume all bread works the same way. Flour becomes dough, dough rises, bread bakes, and that is the end of the story. But the fermentation method changes everything. Packet yeast was designed for speed, commercial yeast. From a packet is usually a selected industrial strain grown in controlled conditions for one main purpose: make dough rise as fast as possible. It produces gas quickly, expands the dough, and gives the appearance of finished bread in a short time. A loaf can be ready in roughly 1.5 hours. Convenient? Yes. Complete? Not even close. Because while the dough rises, another important issue often remains unresolved. Phytic acid. The hidden anti-nutrient grains naturally contain a compound called phytic acid. Plants use it as a storage and protective mechanism. The problem is that in the human digestive system, phytic acid can bind to minerals such as iron, magnesium, zinc, calcium. When that happens, part of those minerals may pass through the body without being absorbed efficiently. So a person can eat bread regularly and still gain less nutritional value from the grain than expected. This matters even more with age, when mineral absorption may already become less efficient. What slow fermentation does differently. Traditional starters contain wild yeast plus beneficial bacteria, especially lactic acid bacteria. During long fermentation, these microorganisms produce enzymes and acids that help break down phytic acid. That changes the nutritional picture dramatically. Minerals become more available to the body instead of staying locked inside the grain structure. But that is not the only benefit. Slow fermentation can also begin breaking down complex carbohydrates, some hard-to-digest compounds, portions of gluten structure. As a result, many people find traditionally fermented bread easier to tolerate than fast industrial bread. Better blood sugar response. Rapidly made bread often digests quickly, which can create sharper glucose spikes followed by faster drops in energy. Slow fermented bread tends to behave differently. Because the starch structure has been altered during fermentation, energy may be released more gradually. That can mean more stable energy, longer satiety, less sudden hunger after eating. For people managing insulin resistance, prediabetes, or type 2 diabetes, this difference can be meaningful. Why older generations often had fewer complaints. Many people today say bread leaves them heavy, bloated, or uncomfortable. Yet previous generations often ate bread daily without describing the same widespread issues. The grain itself did not change as much as people think. The major shift was the move from slow-living fermentation to fast industrial processing. Bread still looked like bread, but biologically, it became a different food. One potato can help you create a living starter culture that keeps producing bread for years when cared for properly. Why potato works so well? This is not random folklore. When potatoes are cooked, starches move into the water. That warm potato water becomes a nutrient-rich environment containing carbohydrates and minerals that help wild yeast establish quickly. Compared with plain sugar water, potato water often creates a more stable beginning for a young starter. It can also produce a milder flavor than flour-only starters, closer to the bread many families remember from earlier generations. What you need: 1 large potato, clean glass jar, cloth or paper towel, rubber band, non-chlorinated water. If your tap water contains chlorine, let it sit overnight first or use filtered water. Chlorine can slow or suppress microbial growth. Step-by-step method. Step 1. Peel and boil. Peel the potato. Boil it in plenty of water until fully soft. This usually takes 30 to 40 minutes. Do not undercook it. Raw starch can encourage the wrong microbial balance. Step 2. Save the water. Remove the potato and pour the cooking water into a clean glass jar. Let the liquid cool until warm, not hot. Hot liquid can kill the microorganisms you are trying to cultivate. Step 3. Add mashed potato. Mash the cooked potato and return some of it to the jar. This gives the culture extra starch and food while it develops strength. Step 4. Cover. Don't seal. Cover the jar with cloth or paper towel and secure it with a rubber band. Do not tighten with a solid lid. The culture needs airflow. Step 5. Keep warm. Place the jar in a warm location away from direct sunlight. After 24 to 48 hours, bubbles may begin to appear. That is a sign fermentation has started. By day 2 or 3, if activity is steady, it may be ready to use. How to know it's healthy? Look for visible bubbles, pleasant fermented aroma, consistent activity, slight rise or foam. A healthy starter should smell alive, fresh, yeasty, mildly tangy. If it smells rotten or strongly unpleasant, discard it and begin again with a clean jar. How to bake with it? For about 300 grams of flour, use roughly 200 to 250 milliliters of active starter. This is flexible. Very active starter equals use a little less. Young starter equals use a little more. The dough will rise slower than commercial yeast dough. That is normal and beneficial. The extra time helps create flavor and improves fermentation quality. Watch the dough, not the clock. When it becomes airy and noticeably larger, it is ready. How to keep it alive? Do not throw it away after baking. Boil another potato later. Add cooled potato water and a little mashed potato to what remains in the jar, and the culture can revive quickly. Store it in the refrigerator between uses. Take it out a few hours before baking, let it warm up, and it becomes active again. Now you no longer depend on a packet from the store. You have a living tool in your kitchen. Making traditional bread is not only about flavor or self-reliance. It can also change how your body responds to one of the most common foods people eat every week. Better mineral availability. When phytic acid is reduced through slow fermentation, Minerals in the grain become easier to access. That means nutrients such as iron, magnesium, zinc, calcium may be absorbed more effectively compared with quickly fermented bread. This matters because many people eat bread often. Small differences repeated daily can become meaningful over time. Why magnesium matters more. With age after age 50, magnesium deserves special attention. It plays a role in sleep quality, muscle and nerve function, heart rhythm, blood pressure, balance, energy production. Many adults consume too little magnesium or do not absorb it efficiently. If a staple food regularly interferes with mineral availability, that can add to the problem. Choosing better fermented bread is not a magic cure, but it can support the bigger picture. Zinc and immune support. Zinc is strongly connected to immune function, wound healing, and recovery. Low zinc status may contribute to getting sick more often, slower recovery, reduced resilience during stress. Again, no single food solves everything, but reducing barriers to mineral absorption can help. Better blood sugar stability. Slow fermented bread often leads to steadier digestion than highly processed fast-rise bread. Instead of a sharp spike and crash, some people experience smoother energy, longer fullness, fewer cravings soon after eating. That can be valuable for people dealing with prediabetes, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes management, though personal responses vary. Goat microbiome support. Traditional starter cultures contain beneficial fermentation organisms. While baking changes many of them, the fermentation process still creates compounds that can support digestive health and a healthier food matrix. A healthier gut environment is linked with more than digestion. It also connects to immune function, mood regulation, energy levels. Modern science continues to study these relationships in greater depth. The bigger idea. This is not about calling one loaf good and another bad. It is about understanding that how food is made matters. Two loaves may look similar on the outside, but one was rushed for convenience. The other was transformed slowly by living fermentation, and your body may notice the difference. Today, many products in stores use the word sourdough as a marketing label. But not every loaf with that word is truly made the traditional way. How to check a real sourdough loaf. 1. Read the ingredients. A true sourdough bread should be very simple. Flour, water. Salt, starter, culture. If you also see added commercial yeast, the loaf may use sourdough flavoring or starter only as a minor ingredient, not as the real leavening method. 2. Fermentation takes time. Traditional sourdough usually needs many hours to develop properly. Fast express production is rarely the same process. 3. Shelf life can be better. Naturally fermented bread often keeps well longer because acids created during fermentation can slow spoilage. I don't have time. Many people say starter bread sounds great, but they are too busy. Let's be honest. The first setup may take about 10 minutes of real work. After that, maintenance can be just a few minutes every week or two. Most of the process is waiting time, not labor time. You mix, leave it, and go live your life. Why it's worth it. For a small amount of effort, you can gain more independence, better flavor, slower traditional fermentation, bread many people find easier to digest, less dependence on store shortages, a living kitchen skill that improves over time. Final thought. A potato, 3 days and a jar can reconnect you to a process people trusted for generations. What was once normal knowledge became rare. Now you know it again. And once a living starter sits in your kitchen, you are no longer waiting for the next empty shelf.